Welcome back. This is section 3 on our part series on Unit 5, States of Consciousness, and this will be the second part of Module 24, which has to do with dreams. Dreams is an especially fascinating topic for pretty much everybody because, of course, everybody is interested to know, do dreams really have meaning, or are they just our mind at play and so forth. In this section, we'll actually be looking at the major theories that explain dreams and taking a look at what dreams research shows, what dream research actually shows us. So, again, Module 24. Second part, the dream section. Dreams basically are a manifestation of what we call REM sleep, which we've discussed in our previous two sections. Everyone dreams several times a night, and about 80% of dreams are able to be reported by people on average. Now, we need to differentiate between a true dream and a sleep thought. A true dream is going to have to take place in REM sleep, rapid eye movement, one of the two states of sleep, one of the 4 stages of sleep, as we've discussed previously. And that's going to be a vivid, detailed dream that has sensory and motor sensations. It's going to probably have a story to it. It's going to have both some nouns and some verbs. It's going to have some things that we are going to be able to look at, especially in this book known as a dream dictionary. Yes, you can look up different objects or different verbs in this book, and it will tell you what they mean. Now, whether or not that's actually true or not, we'll talk about. And now the other thing that is not a dream is our sleep thought. It's basically our hallucinations, which you may remember was in non-REM sleep stage 1, known as hypnagogic sleep. All right, where we feel like we're floating or falling. So again, let's take a look at the characteristics of a dream. They're notable because of their hallucinatory imagery, and things seem to discontinue, stop and start, and it seems incongruous. There's things that don't seem to make sense, like we're able to fly, and of course you deludedly accept the fact, of course I can fly, that's what I do, I'm in my dream and I fly. And the dreamer's, again, delusional acceptance of that content, and it seems like there are difficulties remembering it. Now, the difficulties remembering it, we will talk about just briefly. I'll just mention now. One of the ways you can actually take care of that is to put a notepad next to your nightstand or on your nightstand, and whenever you wake up, not making any jokes here, but ask yourself, did you have a dream? Did I have a dream? I have a dream, the Martin Luther King famous speech. So write about whatever dream you had in your dream log, and you can remember it. Now, there are several different reasons as to why we dream in general before we get into the specific names of the theories. To satisfy our own wishes, so there's a wish fulfillment theory. To file away memories, that's the memory consolidation theory. To develop and preserve neural pathways, that's the neuron activation or synthesis model. To make sense of that neural static, kind of the same kind of thing. And to reflect the fact that we are cognitively, our thought processes are growing. And a good example of that would be the REM rebound. So if we take a look at when we actually dream, and previously I mentioned that as newborn children, we actually spend up to 16 hours of sleep. And of that 16 hours, about 8 hours of that is in REM sleep. REM sleep being colored purple here on our slide. Now what's interesting is REM sleep will decline until it becomes rather stagnant here, pretty much the same amount, which is going to be about an hour and a half of total time in the night's period of sleeping, in the sleep at night, pretty much the rest of your life. Notice that waking hours, for you guys here, your waking hours is here. Basically, you're awake for 16 hours if you get 7.5 hours sleep. That's just an average for a lot of teenagers. So let's go ahead and take it to the dream theories. And what we're going to do is fill in the chart. So please, for my students who are doing this with their PowerPoint, please check and make sure that you're staying up to date on your dream theories. On the dream theories chart, we will have the name of the theory, the explanation, and then basically a criticism of it, or what's good about it, what's wrong with it, that kind of thing. Well, of course, the very first dream theory that we're going to look at is the original man who basically invented dream analysis, and his name was Sigmund Freud. This book is a translation of Sigmund Freud's original book written in 1900 about dream analysis called On Dreams. And in it, he basically explains how he came to process his patients' dreams and his own. You guys, Sigmund Freud was fascinated with his own dreams. He literally wrote down every dream he had from the time he was able to write for his entire life. And some of his theories actually came to him in his dreams. For example, the famous Oedipus complex came to him in a dream based on his parents. So let's take a look at his dream theory, and we start with the fact that Freud said that every dream that you have has a manifest content and a latent content. Okay? Manifest versus latent. All right? Now, what's the meaning of dreams? Well, again, it depends on who you ask as to whether or not dreams have any meaning at all. If you ask Freud, oh yes, they have a huge amount of meaning. In fact, they can actually be used to translate and identify issues going on in our regular waking lives. This approach is known as the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic approach, which we talked about way back in Unit 1 as we introduced these approaches to viewing psychology. And Freud, of course, was the leader, the originator of the psychoanalytic theory. And he said that dreams represent the royal road to the unconscious, as he said in his Austrian accent. Dreams represent these unresolved wishes and desires that basically allow us, in the freedom of our dream, to deal with all the emotions and all the wishes and all the desires and all the naughty stuff that we really could not deal with in our waking lives, and play with that at night. Now the thing is, according to Freud, the dreams could not be so blatantly sexual or violent or whatever these wishes and desires are. So they're cloaked in symbolism. And that's where analysis of the dreams, particularly analysis using dream dictionaries and psychoanalytic tools, allow us to be able to know what the dream really means. Now it has two layers to it, the manifest content and the latent content. Let's go ahead and use a famous iceberg analogy, and we use this actually with a couple of different Freud theories. This one we'll use for the levels of consciousness. So basically, if we look at your mind as an iceberg, the largest part of the iceberg is the part below the water. Kind of like the part of the iceberg that the captain of the Titanic forgot was so big, if you get what I'm saying there. All right? So we have things that we're really not conscious about, and then this island here is our conscious thoughts. And then there's a preconscious level, which we'll talk more about in the personality unit. And then there's this large area here called the unconscious. And it's that unconscious that is playing, that is creating symbols, and creating all these wishes and desires with symbols while we're asleep. Now, the two layers of Freud's theory are the manifest content and the latent content. The manifest content is the remembered storyline. Basically, it's the nouns and the verbs. It's the who did what happened, where to go, and so forth. It's actually the storyline. It's what actually happened in the dream. But, according to Freud, that's our brain basically producing this story because we can't actually handle all the secret wishes and desires and so forth, even when we're asleep. So what we do is we create this story that then can be analyzed using, of course, Freudian technique and Freudian help, psychoanalytic help, and get to the hidden meaning. The hidden meaning is called the latent content. Latent actually means hidden. So the underlying hidden meaning of the dream is different. So if we take a look at how it all plays out, dreams are the sequence of images, emotions passing through a sleeping person's mind. There's an hallucinatory imagery about it. There's discontinuities, incongruities, and again, we accept the content and we have difficulties remembering, as we said earlier. So our first theory, and you can label this theory number 1 in your PowerPoint, is that Freud, in his book, talked about wish fulfillment. And it's a way for us to get rid of, or not really necessarily get rid of, but deal with those unacceptable feelings that cause us guilt, remorse, and so forth in our psyche, in our unconscious. And remember again, manifest is the storyline. That's the part that you might tell people what it's about. Freud, after he analyzes it, or you analyze it with Freudian help, or you could go online and have Freudian scholars actually help you. There's actually a lot of lay people where this is their hobby, is analyzing dreams. You can literally go on websites called dream circles and type in your dream, and a bunch of people will actually help you analyze it. What fun! What fun! Okay. I wonder what kind of jobs allow those people to be able to do that. But in any case, it is kind of interesting to think about that your dreams could be analyzed. Again, emphasizes internal conflicts, motives, unconscious forces, mainly sexual and violent, as we've said before for Freud. Just so you know, there's much evidence to refute all of this. When you go see a Freudian psychologist, they're not going to put you on a couch and actually talk to you and ask you about your dreams and then analyze them. They might ask you about a dream and ask you what your feelings are about it. But pretty much this idea of analyzing dreams is a little bit fanciful and is really not based on current psychological research. The idea that there are symbols behind your dreams is, of course, something that's fascinating for us to look at. But it's kind of in the realm of a horoscope. We kind of can read things into it because our minds are creative and imaginative. So again, and there's, of course, a whole lot, we're not going to go into these things, but there's symbolization in your dream. There's condensation where you put several people together, male characters together, female characters together, displacement, secondary elaboration, and so forth. A lot of information there, and it is fascinating. So if we fill out our chart, we have our first dream theory, and again, the hidden meaning. But we need to point out that there is very little scientific support for this theory. Dreams can be interpreted in many different ways, and Freud does not have the inside track on that. In looking at the second theory, we have something called information processing. The idea is we take in a lot of information during the day, and so at night we basically process this information, consolidate our memories. If you remember, that was one of the theories of why we sleep, for example, memory consolidation. And the critical consideration is interesting, though. Why is it, if this is true, then it's all about stuff that's happening during our day and we're going to consolidate those memories. Why is it that a lot of dreams are about things that we've never really experienced? That we don't have these things in our everyday lives that we've experienced? Granted, a lot of stuff is, but there's actually a lot of stuff that isn't. Now, how do you explain having a dream about Uncle Ed when you haven't talked to Uncle Ed since you were 5 years old? That's not a recent memory. The third theory is called, that basically is the idea that dreams have a physiological function. Physiological function basically is the idea of the brain, basically, going back to our slide here, physiological function is the idea that our bodies are going to be playing around at night. Now, before we move on to physiological function, let's just go back a minute and catch our breath. Let's review. True dreams are for no particular reason. That's the prevalent view. And I know that's not the answer you guys wanted to hear, that dreams don't really have any real meaning. But that's pretty much the view that psychology looks at today, based on the most recent cognitive and brain research. Information processing says that there is some evidence that we do consolidate our memories, and it does have some facilitation of neural development. That's where we get the physiological function. That when your brain actually goes into REM sleep, that may develop and preserve certain neural pathways, making your brain necessarily healthier. But again, it does not explain why we tend to experience dreams that seem to have so much meaning. There's a lot of dreams where we remember that dream for quite a while because it had so much meaning to us. Again, the physiological function, third theory, says that there's periodic brain activity during REM sleep, and the brain makes neural connections. Speaking of neural connections, our fourth theory, called neural activation, says that during REM sleep, which is when we're dreaming, you guys remember that from module 23, and our state of sleep called the REM, that it evokes random visual memories of which our sleeping brains weave into stories. Now, I don't mean to give my opinion, but to me this makes the most sense. Basically, the brain is sending you dopey signals via neurons that are activated. All these different types of information are coming in, and your brain, as it always does, tries to organize the information, tries to put it together and to make sense. So that can explain why you've got all sorts of dopey things coming together, all sorts of weird things happening, all sorts of old memories and everyday new stuff, and you put it, and your brain puts it all together and makes a really strange movie or a video out of it, as you were. Now, the critical consideration is if the individual's brain is weaving the stories, sometimes we found research where this story does tell us about the dreamer. And I agree with that criticism, but I still hold true to this fourth one called neural activation. The neural activation theory is sometimes called the activation synthesis theory, based on Robert McCarley and Earl Hobson's studies in 1977. And with Hobson and McCarley, they found that the brain has these dopey signals, and your dream is nothing more than just creating a story with a whole bunch of weird things in it. To summarize with that activation synthesis theory, basically the visual cortex along with the limbic system, remember that's where your hippocampus is, your memories, and your amygdala, your emotions, putting it all together, those two things, putting it together to make those dreams, tries to make sense. Our final theory in the chart here is something called cognitive development. Basically it says that dream content reflects a dreamer's cognitive development, their knowledge and understanding. Now there is some research to back this up. As a matter of fact, about the age of 9, dreams began to change. Instead of being like a slideshow of different pictures, at age 9 or 10, dreams become a longer, more complicated narrative. So if the dreams change, because we can relate it to cognitive development, and we look at the cognitive development making a leap to some degree in Piaget's theory of intellectual development, which we'll talk about in Unit 9, then it makes sense. Of course, critical consideration says it doesn't really say anything about the brain's neural activation. So what are we to believe? Well, could be all of these theories, could be none of them. That's what current research is showing. To summarize one more time, dreams clearly are, this is evidence for the last theory, cognitive maturation. Many mammals experience REM sleep. We're not the only animals that dream. Now, when you see your dog twitching and so forth, and you hear him making noises and so forth, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's chasing a rabbit in his dreams. Just like if your muscles are twitching in your bed, it doesn't mean in your dream you're running. But we do know that there are dream changes as we get older. So again, at age 9, dreams are less like a sideshow and the dream is more like an actor. I've found some information here for your information viewing here about flying dreams and why we have flying dreams. It says here, flying dreams are often symbolic and refer to aspects of your spirit, rising or falling. And the flying dreams tend to indicate a desire to rise above the mundane settings of life, to gain access to your capabilities with regard to your ambition in the world, to gain psychological freedom from your everyday problems. Wow, we could all use that, right? To compensate for a feeling of inferiority, by the way, inferiority complex given to us by a psychoanalyst by the name of Alfred Adler, and triumph over great difficulties and overcome obstacles. And of course, all of this information that you see here is taken from the Freudian belief that dreams have meaning and that symbols are included in the dreaming. And that's where the dream dictionaries come out. Now, before we leave dreams and talk about what people dream about and see if your dreams are weird or not, let's mention something called lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is a fascinating concept. The idea, it's actually the idea behind the movie Inception, which is where if you're in a dream and you know you're in a dream, can you control what goes on in the dream? Now, in the movie, the answer is yes, but it's kind of creepy. In real life, the answer is yes, and it can be very empowering. Let me explain. Lucid dreaming is where dreams are dreams in which you become aware you're dreaming, and then you can learn control over them in your dream. Now the way you do this is you need to purchase a set of lucid dreaming goggles, which you can get off